we got to start off with Bill Walton. Saul, Brad, this was when you think of iconic people on the West Coast, when you think of iconic just personalities, period, good dudes, Bill Walton's going to be in the top of that list.
Oh, 1,000,000%. I mean, listen, man, he was the ambassador for the whole conference for the better part of about a decade and a half, and even before that, as a UCLA Bruin, and his love for even U of A because of his son playing there. I mean, he was just a 1 in a million kind of guy, and I think, what was so funny about his tenure, in sports, and especially sports broadcasting, covering college basketball, I think one of the things that people would always roll their eyes at is some of the nonsensical things that he did. But I actually thought that that's what made him so unique, is that he never took himself so seriously. And it's sports. And Mike, you say it a million times, like, dude, we're just talking about sports. It doesn't have to be that serious. And that's how I feel. That's what I felt like Bill Walton brought to the table. He just was so lighthearted, and it was like, hey, at the end of the day, these are a bunch of kids competing against each other at one of the highest levels in the world. Like, there's nothing wrong with this, and if there's something bad that happens, it's okay. They're going to get over it. They're going to move on, and they're going to be better for it. And that's just the amazing life that he lived. Right,
but man, this is Brad. Go ahead.
There was a shtick, and once you understood it, and it wasn't that complicated, but for some people it was highly entertaining, because if you look between the, Grateful Dead references and the saguaro cactus, he did as much research on this league, or that league, I guess now is the way to say it, as anyone. I mean, he knew the ninth guy on each team. He knew how they ran. You didn't get just generic insight. And then, I know that some people never understood it, but he would say, like, this is the most important possession in Stanford history. Yes, it was hyperbole. That was the fun of it, because a lot of us talk like that. So I thoroughly enjoyed him. I thought he was a great asset to the broadcast. And because he already started as a parody of himself, it never got tiring. I think Vital got tiring because he amped up the shtick over and over and over till, it became a parody. But I didn't think Walton ever did.
Yes, with when it comes to Bill Walton, I've got a story for you. I talked with Bill Walton once, and I'm sure that Bill Walton does not remember this time, but either way, I talked with him once.
Surprised.
Yeah, I know. Very hard to believe. Very hard to believe. Well, when I was the size of his wife and he was having to look down at me like this, but I asked him, I said, and this is a total Mike Luke question. I said, what's the best basketball team in that you've seen in the Pac-12 in the last 30 years? And he says, gee, I don't know that I've been asked that question before, because he hasn't been asked that question. It's a stupid question. But he says, I always talk with Luke about if in 2001, if they had Reuben Douglas still on the team when Gilbert Arenas was hurt, they probably would have beaten Duke. He says, I'm going to go with 2001. And then I was like, it was just amazing. People look at him as this, like, oh, he's just this clown that had all this weird stuff going on. There was a lot more to it. There was a lot more depth, and his passion was serious. That's the cool thing about it. There's nothing fake about him. And I think that's something in this day and age. What you saw with Bill Walton was, pretty much what you got. Good dude all the way around. And one guy said this, at his funeral, it's going to be a who's who, and those stories are going to be amazing, Saul.
Well, I don't think people show up for you just because basketball, right? I think it's because of who you are as an individual and how you make people feel. My favorite thing that I kind of go by is people invest in people, and Bill Walton invested in people like no other. He always, every single time you meet him, and you can ask anybody, he would always introduce himself, even if it was the 500th time that he met you, right? He tried to make you, like, this was his MO was to try and make you feel like you were having the best day ever, because that's the way he's trying to make you feel, right? Like, it's a blessing to be on this earth. We don't have a lot of time. I don't think anybody embodied that more than Bill Walton. Like, he enjoyed every second of every day, it felt like. And the way he came across to you, it just felt so genuine. I met him a couple times, but the one time I had like a long, lengthy conversation with him was when I was in Colorado, covering U of A. And before the game, I went up to him, and he was preparing for the game, and he looked at me. He was just like, Saul, I would love to meet with you after the game, but it's got to be after the game and I got to prepare, but I definitely want to talk to you. And I was just like, okay, cool. And so then afterwards, we sat there for about 20 minutes, me and Alec White and a bunch of other dudes. And he was just so authentic, and he genuinely cared about what has your journey been like, right? Like,
Right.
what have you done to get here? And since I was a non-traditional student, and I think at that time I was like maybe 36, 37 years old, he asked me, what was my path? What was my journey? And why was it so unique that I was here doing this at the school of my dreams? And he just thought that was an amazing thing. And he just made me feel so important at the moment. And it was just really cool. He had a unique gift in that way.
Brad.
I got to meet him once. Actually, ironically enough, in 01 when I mistook his wife, I believe Lori, for Luke's girlfriend because she was very youthful looking. Found out she was actually not too age appropriate. But no, it was a couple years later. I'm covering a UCLA Arizona game at Poly, and Bill is sitting right behind me in the normal seats, the alumni seats, and no one's leaving him alone. Next to me was Bill Frieder, who was preparing to do a game that Saturday. This was a Thursday game. And Frieder offered Walton his seat so he could be left alone. And Bill wouldn't take it. He's like, no, I'm not credentialed media. You sit there, Bill. He's like, well, and I was eavesdropping. He's like, well, they're bothered. He's like, no, they're no bother. He's like, if I miss a shot or two, it won't affect my life. And so I had Bill Frieder next to me, Bill Walton behind me, Frieder talking my ear off the entire game, apologizing the whole time because he knew I was writing. And I could hear Bill Walton basically holding court. Every time out, someone else would come for a picture, or wasn't a real cell phone picture. A lot of people with actual, like, the portable cameras, the digital cameras.
Cameras?
Because it was like 03, 04. It was. I know it was the game where Channing Frye was fouled at the end, but they didn't call it.
But they didn't call it. I remember that game.
Frieder said it was a foul. He's like, you're not buying that call, though. And it was just kind of a fun memory because I had two of the biggest characters really in Pac-12 history kind of bookending me, so to speak.
I was texting Saul back and forth a little bit last night, and I think the people that get life are the ones that get up and they realize, you know what, I don't get this day back. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but I'm going to try to enjoy this day. Life isn't promised to anybody, and tomorrow's not promised to anybody. I believe that when Bill Walton looked back on his life, he was probably a pretty happy man, because he lived the life that he wanted to be able to live. And yeah, he's talked about it. He said in his book, he dealt with depression. He dealt with certain stuff like we all do, but I think he tried to enjoy life to its fullest, Saul.
I think the biggest takeaway I have is I just can't, I can recall, hundreds, if not thousands of times where I just wasted my own time dwelling about things that I could not control, and really thinking about the negative aspects of so many different things, and having to shift my mindset really over the last 10 years. And when you meet somebody like a Bill Walton that really appreciated life the way he did, and the perspective, like, why would I waste my time trying to troll somebody on Twitter or go at a different account because they had some graphic that was wrong? Like, why does that even matter? Right? Like, right. Let's just enjoy life. And if there's a problem, then you bring it up and you move along, but it doesn't mean it's going to be the end of the world. And it doesn't mean that anybody's trying to destroy another person. Like, sports is inherently so negative because we're always looking for what's wrong instead of what's right. Right. And it can be exhausting. And there's times when we're doing this job and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is just so much, because people want perfection at every little second and step, even though in their own lives, that's not how it goes. And that's the thing about Bill Walton, is that he appreciated even the beauty of things that were not perfect. And at least from my perspective, yesterday when he passed away, just kind of thinking about his whole life, thinking about the SIDs that he's coming in contact with. And I talked to Doug Tamaro at ASU, and he was just in tears all day. He was really distraught about that because they were really close, just like Matt Enser at U of A. I just thought, man, you know what? I think that's the way that I'm going to think about moving forward, is just like, how can I make not only my day, but everybody else's day as good as it can possibly be. And I think if we can just take a smidge of what Bill Walton presented to us in life, I think we'll be much better for it.
I mean, just look at the legacy. Arguably one of the, if not the greatest college basketball player of all time. Two-time NBA champion. At one point, the #1 NBA announcer, got to announce the Pac-12,